All right, reading another part of Other Terrors, an inclusive anthology. This one is The Asylum by Holly Lynn Walrath. It says, "The world is full of enemies. There is no safe place." That is Anne Sexton. And it is only after one is in trouble that one realizes how little sympathy and kindness there are in the world. Nellie Bly. All right, poem. Men are called insane, but women are called lunatics. The word means moonstruck. A woman's madness is unpredictable, cyclical, like the gray moon. Women are driven by its light like tides, full of cracks and flaws, just threatening to let the light show. Administration and reception. One of us practiced lunacy every night in the mirror to get here. We feel quite bad for her because Nellie is a journalist, and she merely had to act crazy to get here by pretending to believe she was poisoned. This is not so bad by itself. Some of us did this as well because we were hungry and poor, but also because Nellie seems to think she will be allowed to leave when she tells them the truth. You see, she treats this place like a game, but it's much more than that. We must admit Nellie is a rather good actress. Even Ida agrees, and Ida saw Sarah Bernhardt die on stage, in French no less, at her first performance in America with 27 curtain calls. Ida's family is rather rich. In the entryway, there are haircloth sofas, and we are asked to remove our jewelry for safekeeping, our pearls laid neatly in a box labeled with our names. The doctors ask us why we are here, and we never know why, not the real reason. We are not sure where here is until we are locked in the ward by the overseers, who are plain older women named Miss Davis and Miss Brown. No decent married woman would be caught dead in here. That is the message they send. The night they brought Nellie in, we heard her ask, "What if there's a fire?" as Miss Davis locked her door with the little key ring she carries at her waist. We laughed along with the overseers like hyenas. Then all of the women would burn up, Miss Davis said, and retreated to her desk in reception. It has not escaped our attention that Miss Davis and Miss Brown are women too, but for some reason we are the ones referred to as such. Nellie begged to God the first 9 nights, having only planned on being here for 10, until someone, we believe it was Ethel, said in the darkness, in a low and honestly threatening tone, "She'll not last till morning." Then there was a strangled noise, and the voice went quiet. In the morning, Ethel would not speak. When she saw Nellie, she shook her head in terror and tried to run and had to be tied down. The doctors were very curious about the silence, and so they cut out Ethel's tongue so they could study it. "Barbarian," said Hattie, who was a scientist, or was before her colleagues had her committed for being a woman with too many ideas. Later, Ethel had convulsions and was sent to the dead house. But of course Nellie did leave, and we are told she went and recounted her story to the newspapers. It was not our story because we are still here. We did take small comfort in the fact that after her little tryst here, Nellie was never quite the same again. She kept it with her, this viciousness this place bred. Oh, there is one thing we forgot to mention about reception, which is the oiled bronze plaque dedicated to the man who donated the money to build the place, which says, "While I live, I hope." We think it's kind of funny, which is the only reason we mention it here. The baths. After newcomers are thoroughly stripped, sometimes forcefully, they are given a bath, which is always full of icy gray water, and washed all over with soft soap by the Irishwoman, who is so old we think she might have always been here. Perhaps she was installed with the other fixtures. The water is not changed between us, so it is better to go first, but when one is last, one feels a kind of kinship, a mystical burning sensation all over the body. We are dirt together. We may die together. At least we can endure the hardship of having bodies together. One woman would not consent to being stripped. We found her later in the ward, chained to her bed. She said she didn't feel right in her body because it was female, and she had worked so hard for so many years to hide the parts of her that were female, the body that would not be right no matter how she tried to make it so, and it drove her nearly mad to have everyone see it on display. She wished she could strip away all her female parts. We had all felt that way at some point or another, so when Hattie asked if she'd rather we referred to her as a man, the new girl nodded, and we all agreed to call her James, which was her brother's name, and James was very calm after that. At least we believe he was. We only saw him for the short while before he was sent away. Someone said his family came to retrieve him. For a long time, his story was a kind of rallying cry, a mythology built around escape and freedom, and some of us insisted on being called men too. Hattie, in particular, preferred to be called doctor. This reclamation among us, even if it was only between ourselves, was comforting in a small way. But after the incident with Hattie and the scissors, we stopped telling stories altogether, even among ourselves. We became soft doll women. Nothing could poke or prod us. The infirmary. Dear God, we need death like we need doctors. Mary is addicted to the young doctor like we all are, needle-smitten. She purrs in his hands when he takes her pulse, cries when he must leech her or if he asks for it, like we all do, and she is the first to join his retinue of so-called special cases. the most hysteric of hysterical. My young hussies, he calls them when he thinks no one is listening. He is flirty, making the chosen feel holy as he opens their thighs to make his little incisions. What is it about a white coat that makes us salivate, makes us long to throw ourselves in his strong arms, to fog up those tiny, incomprehensible spectacles with the ghost fog of our female brains? Perhaps it is the way his brow furrows in consternation when we hurt ourselves. For him it is always for him, dear heart. Or the gentle way he says our names. Gladys, Henrietta, Ethel. Like a sexual sibilance. Ida, Gertrude, Annie. Soft and yet pulsatingly, entrancingly hard. Hattie, Nellie, Maria, Katerina, Isabella. He puts yellow powder in our tea that sits on top of the brown water like the bloom of algae. The young doctor and we moan. He is learning how to use a scalpel, and we are learning the method of calming a woman involves hands and privacy curtains. God give us the young doctor every day, every hour. The older doctor, Dr. Smith, performs 2 types of surgeries at night, lobotomies or hysterectomies. Neither seems terribly effective. In the case of the former, the women become, if not more comfortable, then more docile. They lose some spontaneity, some sparkle. Something about their eyes goes dim and dark. No longer speaking in tongues or Spanish or Italian, they are like mice. You can tell which ones among them have been lobotomized by their gait on the rope gangs. The others often drag them along across the lawn when we go out for our walks. Dead baggage. The latter is even less popular, for it sometimes is accompanied by a sweating sickness. Those who awake in the night strip naked and stand moaning in front of their windows begging for a knife. Complications include death. But they no longer flirt with the doctors, the hysterectomized, so it is often considered a wild success. Parties are given, tea and hard cakes, the mirror shuffled into the baths again. It must be a lot of pressure to serve this many women. We don't blame the young doctor. After all, he's not much more than a boy under all that white and gloves. No, we don't blame him at all. The terrace. The trouble with the doctor's girls, as we call them, is not all of us are chosen, so the left behind are angry. Literal rapture has occurred, and we are left in our bodies with only our sin. Whoever believes in sisterhood is gravely mistaken and must be corrected. We don't know what day it is. Some of us still don't believe where we are. We are cold and smell like rotten flesh. We are hungry, God damn it. Give us entertainment. God, if we had the power to kill, what wouldn't we do? For example, let's just say for illustrative purposes, we might ambush Mary in the night with the keys we stole from Miss Brown when she was napping after her nightcap, and drag little Mary, kicking and not exactly screaming, with her knickers between her teeth, but not exactly quiet either, to the terrace, where we imagine they once gave fine parties for the celebration of the opening of this establishment. Secret parties, of course, because it is a secret institution. It is a white-columned, beautiful place looking out on the midnight stillness of a silvery gray moon-decked and manicured lawn, a lovely place to die. And convenient, with its open rafters accessible with a ladder stolen from the workshop. This is merely an example, of course. In the morning, when the young doctor comes to us wearing his white gloves, redolent of sex and cologne, we can only shrug. What utter disgrace, the young doctor says softly. What utter lack of regard for their common man. Common woman, dear doctor. Give us at least that. We have so little left to love, after all. She was kind of alarming. Mary hung by her red curls in the moonlight. Sometimes we still see her in our dreams. However, most of us sleep soundly now, when we are allowed to get any rest at all. We are so very tired. The lawn. Sometimes at night we see long shadows on the lawn. The lighthouse beam sweeps over them, and struck, they freeze like iron idols. When darkness returns, the shapes move on, into the woods or perhaps down the wharf to the sparkling moonlit sea. Gertrude says that they look like lost women. She believes they are escapees. But we know that's just Gertrude being crazy. We know this place is easy to get into and impossible to get out of. Maybe there's a male ward on the island, says Maria, hopefully, and we laugh. Hattie takes a burning twig from the fire, hand reaching through the grate that is meant to protect us and fingers coming out red and blistered. She draws the shapes on the floor and numbers them, trying to puzzle them out in that scientist's way of hers. Perhaps they were here before us all, alien, creatures abandoned in the midst of cities growing up around them, on islands more distant than this one, children among wolves. Annie puts a hand on the charcoal and wipes it away. The only children here are us, she says, because we never grew up. Still, we watch the grass move and listen to its whispers. When we go for our walks like birds on a line, we peck at the ground, searching for some evidence of the shadows in the hot sun, sweating under our flannels. Sometimes we roll in the grass like crazy women, breathing in the scent of the shadows. Something bitter, salt-wrecked, bloody like the sea. the laundry. Clara rubs lye in her eyes and stands on the bin screaming, "Hurrah, I have killed the devil." We scream too, and Grace laughs while the Irish woman tries to catch Clara, whose eyes are melting down her cheeks like butter left on the windowsill on a hot day. Even this makes us ravenously hungry. When consulted later, Clara tells us that she couldn't stand it anymore, the smell of pig fat and blood washing out of the white linens. "It's like I was washing away any proof of her body, that she had one, and it was a good, clean body given to her by God himself," she says between sobs. She was speaking of Pearl's body, of course. God rest her soul. Pearl, who would take spells and had to be sent to the surgeon. Pearl, who Clara loves most of all, who would pick flowers to leave on Clara's bedside after a walk, who we saw carted off to the dead house. We tuck Clara into bed and try not to look at her face very closely. We know her by touch, after all. We know all of us by touch. In the morning, Clara is gone. "It is good she is with God," Eleanor whispers. "It is good they are together." We eat boiled meat and potatoes in the dining hall. We eat boiled meat and potatoes and oatmeal and molasses and tea and unbuttered black bread and fresh fish unseasoned and unsalted beef tea and spiders and tobacco juice and hard cakes when we get them and rats that Annie catches with her traps and mussy butter and muddy tea and ginger cookies and yellow water and gravy and mutton and white winter radishes and quince sauce and soup and bread pudding. There are no knives or forks. We eat with our hands except those who cannot because they have palsy or no teeth or cannot abide the taste of spiders. God, what we wouldn't give for an orange. There is a kitchen, but the door is locked and we can't see inside. If we do not eat what is on our dreadful plate, we are force-fed, and very often it is Ida who is left to the pump. Her face is quite terrible to behold when she is given back to us, wide-eyed and blanched like a turnip. Her mouth is bloodier and bloodier. She tells us she swallowed a tooth. She is deemed to be particularly troublesome and vicious by the staff. Becoming coarse, massive woman takes a lot out of us. The very good girls who are the young doctor's favorites are given fresh fruit and greens from the gardens and live apart from the rest of us in individual rooms very near the infirmary, where the doctor can supervise them in case they have any need of him at night, which is when things always seem to go wrong. The workshop. 52 women in leather and iron, pounding hammers over wood like gods of thunder. The shoes themselves are beautiful things, red and blue and peacock green, shoes we would have worn to go dancing in our lives before the secret institution. Magic shoes which could have transformed us. Who among us had not dreamed of putting on the shoes and dancing across the ward into the arms of the young doctor, out across the lawn and down to the wharf, under the moonlight, out over the waves until we were alone at sea? It is Hattie who squirrels away some tools, hidden in her slip and tied around a string at her waist. Tools that are used to treat us when we are sick, or to remove a troublesome tooth, or when one of the doctors gets girls pregnant, which happens more than we could care to admit. That's what surprised us about Hattie's death. She was studying us. A human rat trap this place is, and rats are meant for experiments. We would go to her with our worries, our sleeplessness. She put these problems in jars, kept under her cot, and at night they glowed like fireflies, ebbing, weeping from the rubber seals. So when Hattie killed the young doctor with a pair of scissors and had to be sent to the dead house, yes, I believe we were surprised. Or we felt something, anyway. And maybe our ability to still feel is what surprised us. The dead house. If one of us dies, she is sent to the dead house for post-mortem examinations and dissections. The dead house is a small building set off from the lawn under the gentle overhang of trees, and it is painted black. None of us have been there, so we can't say what it's like, but we see the doctors going there, white coats like ghosts on the lawn, and they stay there until very late in the evening, past supper sometimes. Hattie explained to us that in an autopsy, they cut open the body and inspect its organs to determine cause of death. She will go on and on about it if you let her, down to the very grimmest of details. It doesn't seem right, says Eleanor, to cut open our Christian bodies. The chapel. On Sundays, we are rope-led to the Catholic chapel to pray, even though very few of us are actually Catholic. The surgeon, Dr. Smith, is also the priest. He is a rotund and jolly man with gray whiskers and a black ensemble suggestive of the devil. Dr. Smith will hear our confessions, which are either small and pebble-shaped or, if one of us is feeling bored, large and sweating like an elephant. The big lies get Dr. Smith excited, as if he thrives on our wildness. Some women use this as an excuse to receive more opium, because the bigger the sin, the bigger the dose we are given back in the ward. This is a double-edged sword, though, as sometimes the good doctor mixes his vials, and the woman is left speechless or blind. We have not decided if the thrill is worth it. We have so conflated church and the administration of drugs in our minds that there is not one among us who, upon entering the church, does not catch the scent of belladonna. But we were not witches before we came here. But how we sizzle when we step into the holy dim now. Our skin under our slips burns. Carrying the ghosts of those who died before us is so very tiring. There are so many names to recite. If we didn't kill ourselves, then we must try to stop their wild whispering in our dreams. When we first came here, the doctors asked us, "Do you hear voices at night?" And like sane people, we insisted we did not. Now we burn bits of leather and rotten meat and red flannel and fingernails and hair ripped out by the roots and whatever flowers we can find, and ghosts. We burn all the ghosts, even the ones we do not know personally. I heard Miss Brown say they are bringing in bodies from the tuberculosis outbreak to be buried here on this island, says Annie. I bet these aren't just the ghosts of women from the asylum. And soon enough, the longer we are here, the more medicine we take, the longer we are forgotten, the harder we try, the colder we become, the thinner our bodies thin. We begin to hear children and men among the voices. Human overflow on Damnation Island, a senseless mass of humanity. God help them, we feel lucky not to be among them. But what does that say about us? Pottersfield. One summer we are conscripted into burial crews by the overseers. It has not escaped our attention that this is an act of desperation. And we are sent to dig graves, not a right word for the massive pits, filled with rows of rectangular wooden coffins, unmarked, unnamed, unloved. The small ones are the worst. They are so light. And yet something good does come out of this digging, because we are given better fare than our normal repast, and we grow strong. Our shoulders bulk beyond what could be considered ladylike. We have long since ceased to be ladies. We are crazy women, Filipino and Spanish and black and Irish, nameless like the graves. To cool off, we are taken to the water, where we strip naked like fish. After all, the mythical men are on the other side of the island. We think we are in love with the water. Maybe the men work at odd hours from us, Minnie says, hopefully, picking the dead dirt under her nails. There are more graves dug than we can have done. At least we aren't burying our own kind, the kind that is crazy. After a few months of this, it is Gertrude who arrives at a plan, for she is the one who took over when Hattie left, and we admire her brains and her bravery. Gertie whispers the plan to us between shovelfuls of dirt, and we pass it on at night when we sleep, during the morning meal, and while walking in the sun on the rope gang. The bodies arrive at the wharf every day at noon, just as we are taken down to the water by Miss Davis and Miss Brown. Gertrude and Minnie rush the overseers and crash 2 smuggled jars over their heads at once. There is profuse bleeding. After that is a mere matter of keeping them from getting up again, which we achieve with an impressive amount of relish and beatings given how little we had for supper. We take their keys to our shackles. Eleanor says she knows how to steer a boat, and then we are 52 minus 20 women and a whole lot of ghosts on a boat, brandishing irons and shovels at the poor, unsuspecting ferry captain, who is, bless him, alone on the boat. When we think about it, it does seem odd how lucky it is, just this one old man alone on a boat with no one to help him unload the corpses. Then it is a short ride to City Island, around the perilous reefs, which the captain says have claimed many a sailor. He gives us ale, which we split among us, and some sandwiches from his lunch pail, which are liver but taste like the best thing we've ever eaten in our entire, very long lives, for all that the oldest among us is 32. Crazy woman, eh? He spits tobacco juice into the sea and grins a gap-toothed grin. You can't tell by your faces. We are no longer unsure that we are in love with the water. It is blue and glorious and a symbol of freedom, no matter what we will do when we stop onto solid ground. What will we do? None of us has a home to go to or family that does not already think we are insane or dead. Ida laughs and gives the captain a kiss on the cheek and calls him a doll. Minnie watches behind us as if expecting the police to show up at any moment. We were told escapees would be hunted down like rabid dogs. Once a woman escaped, and a policeman came to the reception and told Dr. Smith, if she doesn't come quietly, I'll grab her up like a kitten and shake her, to which Dr. Smith nodded in grave agreement. Each of us looking on the sea wears the far-off dreamy expression that landed us in this human rat trap. Suddenly Ethel says, while I live, I hope. And we all look around at her in surprise, our eyes watery from the fresh, bright sea air, because for now on this boat we've allowed ourselves to hope. Postscript. You didn't think we'd end it there, did you? Of course we didn't escape. We died there and are still dead and will be dead for years to come. It wouldn't be right, would it, to rewrite the truth of that place, a terrible haunted island from which no one escapes? It would cheapen our ghosts like rotten copper. And that is the end of that one. Asylum by Holly Lynn Walrath. I actually really liked that one. It felt very haunting, but realistic. So that was probably one of my favorite ones I've read from other terrors so far. I hope you enjoyed it as well, and thank you for watching. Bye.